Welcome to episode 3 of Azure Bicep Series. In this episode, we're going to cook a web application using Bicep. We'll plug application insights and we'll point our sample code to a public code base sitting in GitHub. For a series recap, episode 1, we spoke about infrastructure as code, Azure Resource Manager, and Bicep. We then created a simple storage account with a container. Episode 2, we introduced Bicep modules, parameters, variables, conditions, and iteration. We did that by creating storage accounts in multiple regions. Links on the video descriptions below. Now, let's create a web application using Azure Bicep. We'll start off by creating main.bicep. Set the target scope to subscription. We'll then start off by creating a resource group, and you'll see when you specify a name, we're using string interpolation, which expects a couple of parameters. Then we go in and create parameters: environment, app name, and location. Complete resource group. We'll then create the app service plan, but we're going to do that by creating modules, which means we have to go in and create another file, app plan.bicep, and then we'll reference it in main.bicep. So what you'll realize here is the app service plan is defined as a server farm, so you don't have an app service plan in the definition of your resources. You always have to use the server farm. So go in, create the name, location, and all the properties that are needed, and we'll specify the parameters that we expecting from main.bicep. We'll also include a condition there that says if it's dev environment, use the free SKU tier. If not, use the shared one. We also outputting the app service plan ID, and we gonna use that when we create our web application. Coming back to main.bicep, we now referencing file app.plan.bicep, specifying all the parameters that we need. We define the is dev environment, which is a boolean, so we specify a condition there to say if the supplied environment is dev, then his environment is dev environment is true, else is false. Then completing all the parameters that we need and specifying the app text, which we don't have now, but we're going to define that. So app text, the text is an object. You'll see on app.plan specified as an object, which means you can specify one or more. And also don't forget to specify the scope and the app service and everything that we define in here. So going into app insight, again using modules, specify the resource in the API, give it a name, the location, the kind is web, provide all the properties that are needed, and the tags, we actually need to use the supplied parameter, so we'll fix that. And we'll output the instrumentation key, which we will reference when we create our web application. File now looks good, no errors. Going back to main.bicep, create a module, reference the right file, create the name and the parameters that are needed. So as long as your bicep file shows the red lines, it means you're missing something. Now it looks good. Again, you specify the scope, which is a resource group, because at the top our scope is the subscription. We're now going to go in and create our web application. It's quite simple. Again, resource, the name, location, and all the properties needed. So you'll see for web application, we're going to use system assigned, identity, text that are needed, and all the properties. As mentioned, whenever we see a red underline, it means that we're missing something or there's an error on our file. In this case, we're missing the parameters, so we'll specify all the parameters that are needed. Now, the server farm ID and instrumentation key ID, a very interesting one. You'll see how we deal with that in main.bicep. While we edit, we create a source control resource, and this is where we're going to link our web app to a GitHub repository. So the parent is web app service that we just defined. Name is web, and we're missing a repo URL. So just copy and paste that repo URL. So GitHub repo URL. Going into main.bicep to create our website module, which references the file that we just created. Now the server farm ID, you'll see that we're saying the app service module in the outputs get the app service plan ID, right? So that's the reason why we specify the output in our app plan.bicep file. The same applies to instrumentation key. We're getting it from our app inside output. Now that our file is complete, let's quickly recap. Right, we created main.bicep where we specified our parameters, the variables that we need, target scope, very important, subscription, because we defining or creating a resource group. We then created 3 modules, one for app service plan, insights, and then website. Let's look into app service plan. So app service plan looks something like this. It is expecting these parameters that you see up here. We have our variables and then the resource with the name, location, and all the properties that are needed. Now going back to main.bicep, you will see that our module has a name and then all the parameters that you saw on the other side. Right, very important, the scope for this deployment is a resource group, and the resource group is this one here that we find earlier. We then defined insights. Quickly into insight, again, very simple. Parameters that you expect, and the resource you want to create. And we need to use the instrumentation key on our file. Therefore, we have an output of an instrumentation key. And last, we have a website. Website looks something like this. Again, parameters, variables, and the resource that we want to create with all the necessary properties. Very important, the outputs that we have on the app service plan and insight. This is how we reference them in website creation. Now let's go into Azure portal. We don't have any resource groups. We'll now go in and deploy using Azure CLI. Simple command, deploy into this location, and my file is main.bicep. Let's go. Should ask me for the environment because I didn't supply a default value. As you can see here, my environment is dev. Let it run and we'll wait. Now that our deployment is successful, let's go into our portal, refresh. We've got rg-stockfill.dev as expected. You'll see on the deployments, we've got 3 deployments succeeded. We have our app service plan, insight, and our web app. Quickly go into the web app, and we want to see if all is looking good. It is in Western Europe, and what we'll do is we'll open this URL and see if we are happy with our web app. Now, going back, one thing I want to check is our app service plan. Very important. You'll see that it is using the F1 free one, because we said if it's dev, use the free, otherwise use the shared. And going into our portal, boom, there you go. Our web app deployed and done. Very, very, very important. Once you've done everything with this, you need to go back and delete this resource group, because if you don't, it's going to cost you money. So it's good to be safe, especially if you're testing and learning, and this will delete over time. We have reached the end of episode. Next, we're going to learn how to create Azure function. We're going to learn how to create Cosmos DB using Bicep. Please subscribe, ask questions, comment, share with your friends. We'll see you next time. Yezo.